What's wrong? This is the one question ringing out of every moment you spend depressed. You desire nothing, you see no future worth striving for. Each second is a violent reminder of how far you are from yourself. The world imposes itself upon you, and in turn, you crawl further and further inside yourself. Sleep and little diversions become temporary escapes. You only value those things that make you feel like you don't have to be you. I'm going to propose that dealing with depression requires a complete shift in perspective. How so? Firstly, we should examine some past cases of depression. Leo Tolstoy, a well-established author with a loving family, nonetheless fell into a deep depression during his midlife. Despite perfecting himself physically and intellectually, Tolstoy couldn't help but ask himself at every moment, what was the point? What will come of what I do today or tomorrow? What will come of my entire life, he wrote. Differently expressed, the question is, why should I live? Why wish for anything or do anything? It can also be expressed thus, is there any meaning in my life that the inevitable death awaiting me does not destroy? Tolstoy laid out 4 approaches one can take when dealing with this sudden despair. Firstly, there is ignorance. Many will simply carry on as if nothing happened. Secondly, there is the option of taking your own life. Thirdly, you could decide to live simply, not out of ignorance, but because taking your own life is kind of a terrifying option. And finally, one could indulge in Epicurean delights, living in the moment and appreciating what time one has. Although certainly this last one is a solution, this approach is something that Tolstoy recognized as mostly reserved for the materially well-off. Many could not afford to do such a thing. Tolstoy himself would settle on something that some may consider an act of naivete. He took a leap of faith. Tolstoy recognized that all of this thinking and rationalizing is actually what made him miserable to begin with. In the words of Krishnamurti, if a pencil is being sharpened all the time, soon there will be nothing left of it. Constant self-analysis can bring about depression. It was only once he resigned himself to the possibility that he could not understand everything about himself and others where he began to appreciate life again. He saw life, existence, and himself as an endless mystery. Does this mean that the depressed person should become religious or spiritual? Not necessarily. Rather, the depressed person should treat their despair not as a solution to be solved or a pathology to be treated, but instead as a mystery to be explored. This video is sponsored by Brilliant. One grievance I've had with some forms of education is that it often approaches things in a sort of problem-solving manner. I felt like I had to understand everything, which put a lot of pressure on me. But what if learning was fun? What if it was playful? That's why I love Brilliant, a fun and interactive way to learn topics that I usually would find to be way too complex. Brilliant's new course on programming has been a blast for me. This course is a great way to get familiar with Python, learn essential coding elements from loops to variables, and overall learn to think like a programmer in order to build robust programs. If your curiosity goes beyond programming, Brilliant also has over 60 other courses with clear and intuitive explanations that can tell you how STEM actually works and how it's relevant in your everyday life. No matter what your level of knowledge, the step-by-step solutions and fun problem-solving exercises ensure that you'll be able to master all sorts of technical subjects, from neural networks to astronomy. To try everything Brilliant has to offer for free for a full 30 days, visit brilliant.org/Sisyphus55. Everyone who clicks the link will also get 20% off their premium annual subscription. As Deleuze and Guattari argue, depression is not a pathology but a special form of knowledge. It signifies something to be discovered and further clarified. It tells us that something is amiss. To deal with one's depression, then, is not a matter of returning to normality. It should be recognized instead as an invitation to reframe your attention, your worldview, and in some way, to change. This means moving beyond one's normal methods of thinking. It means embarking on a mystery, to examine that apparent distance between you and yourself. Pain intensifies self-perception. It provides an outline of the self. It draws its contours. I feel pain, therefore I am, writes Byung-Chul Han. This is where we begin. The mystery is the cause of the pain, and we are now detectives, charged with the task of uncovering what exactly has happened here. In the same way that the horrors of a murder case must be accepted first by detectives on a job, the experience of pain under depression in the form of anhedonia, sorrow, fatigue, or anxiety also cannot be denied. It must first be accepted. But the pain of one's depression could be overwhelming. Similarly, any good detective must make sure they are capable of beginning their work. The depravity of a case might overwhelm any good detective, and so, in most noirs, the detective might change their habits to better prepare themselves for what lies ahead. You, the detective investigating the mystery of your depression, must do the same. This might mean seeing a therapist, getting a blood test, changing your diet, being prescribed medication, or in some way altering your environment. These changes will likely not solve your depression, but they will make the process you are about to undertake a lot easier. The next step is to move from a place of self-analysis and self-awareness to a general awareness. What is the difference? Krishnamurti explains, awareness is observation without condemnation. Awareness brings understanding, because there is no condemnation or identification, but silent observation. This is sometimes called compassionate curiosity, a Stoic form of analysis that goes beyond just looking inwards, but rather looking everywhere. All that appears self-evident, set in stone, must be flipped over and carefully examined. And this must be done without judgment. One of the best ways to enter this space of awareness is through relationship. The detective begrudgingly moves through the case with an assigned partner. At first, they usually don't get along, but soon an appreciation and level of respect is formed. They fill in the gaps that they might have never entertained alone. They ask questions that would have never even been considered. Over time, both detectives begin to share a common sense, a rhythm between the two. Friendship for Deleuze and Guattari is a matter of perception. Like two partners tasked with solving a mystery, the friendship acts as a space where compassionate curiosity can be played out, where each can ask questions without fear of judgment or ridicule. The friend extends your perception and hopefully shakes you out of your existential rigidity to understand plainly that there is still plenty left to understand. A great example of someone uncovering the mystery of their depression is in the case of the famous philosopher John Stuart Mill. On behalf of his disciplinary father, Mill was raised on a philosophy of utilitarianism to maximize happiness for himself and those around him. From this, he was both highly educated and, importantly, largely focused on making the world a better place. I was accustomed to felicitate myself on the certainty of a happy life which I enjoyed, through placing my happiness in something durable and distant in which some progress might be always making. Mill's central aim? To maximize his happiness. Suddenly, however, Mill experienced a severe bout of depression at the age of 20. It was nothing short of an existential crisis. As he wrote, "All my happiness was to have been found in the continual pursuit of this end. The end had ceased to charm, and how could there ever again be any interest in the means? I seemed to have nothing left to live for." He asked himself what he would do if he had accomplished everything he wanted to, and realized simply that the more you make happiness your primary goal, the more difficult it ironically becomes. This is something evident in psychology research. Huda and Ryan, for example, found that in one study, those who pursued goals that were inherently meaningful to them experienced more long-lasting happiness and fulfillment than those who pursued goals that were specifically pursued in order to enhance happiness. From this, it could be argued that happiness should be treated more as a byproduct rather than the sole aim of one's pursuits. Mill states this explicitly. I now thought that this end, happiness, was only to be attained by not making it the direct end. Those only are happy, I thought, who have their minds fixed on some object other than their own happiness. Aiming thus at something else, they find happiness by the way. How did Mill come to the same conclusion that these researchers found? He found a friend who helped him end his constant self-analysis and instead would allow for compassionate curiosity. William Wordsworth, specifically the poems of Wordsworth. What made Wordsworth's poems a medicine for my state of mind was that they expressed not mere outward beauty, but states of feeling and of thought colored by feeling, under the excitement of beauty. Mill's entire life philosophy shifted, and he realized that he had been doing everything with a means to an end. Reading Wordsworth, instead, was an end itself. Who is to say what sort of insights will come from your own plunge into this mystery of depression? Perhaps, like Mill, you will discover that much of your life has been contingent on endlessly checking off accomplishments with some vague sense that doing so will lead to happiness. Or maybe, like Tolstoy, you will strike a delicate balance between reasoning and faith and resign yourself to a life of farming and spiritual practice. Who is to say? All that I wish to communicate is that depression can be viewed as a helpful springboard, an indication that that rift between you and yourself should be investigated. Importantly, I would argue that this investigation, voyage, mystery, or however else you would like to define it, is usually more fruitful in relation with others, whether that is a partner, a friend, a therapist, or simply a good book. What you are embarking on is incredibly important work, and you'll need all the help you can get, from social support to proper diet, and maybe even medication. Now put on your detective hat, keep an open mind, and begin the task of solving the mystery of who you are. This mystery that is your life.